There is a moment that many people experience after a conversation ends. The room becomes quiet. The interaction is over, but the conversation continues inside the mind. Words replay. Facial expressions reappear. Tone of voice is analyzed again and again. Part 51 is about the psychology behind why some people overanalyze everything others say. At first, it may seem like simple reflection. Thinking about conversations can be useful. It helps people understand social interactions, learn from experiences, and improve communication. But for some individuals, this process goes far beyond normal reflection. The mind begins replaying every detail repeatedly, searching for hidden meanings, possible mistakes, or subtle signs that something went wrong. A simple comment from someone can stay in the mind for hours or even days. You might suddenly remember a sentence someone said and start wondering what they truly meant. Did they sound annoyed? Did they mean something else behind their words? Did I say something strange? Did I misunderstand the situation? The questions multiply, and each possible explanation leads to another interpretation. Over time, the mind becomes a constant investigator of social interaction. Every conversation becomes a puzzle that needs to be solved. Part 51 explores why this pattern develops. One major reason is emotional sensitivity. Some people naturally notice small details in communication that others might overlook. They pay attention to subtle shifts in tone, small changes in facial expressions, and slight pauses in conversation. This awareness can be useful. It allows someone to understand others more deeply. But it also means the brain receives more information to process. Instead of focusing only on the main message, the mind begins analyzing every possible signal hidden inside the interaction. Another reason people overanalyze conversations is past experience with misunderstanding. If someone has experienced situations where small words or actions led to conflict, criticism, or rejection, the brain learns to monitor communication carefully. It begins scanning interactions for potential problems before they happen. This process is not conscious most of the time. The nervous system simply becomes more alert to social signals. The goal is protection. If you analyze what people say carefully enough, maybe you can prevent misunderstandings or avoid making mistakes that could damage the relationship. Part 51 also reveals the connection between overanalyzing and fear of judgment. Humans naturally care about how they are perceived by others. Social belonging has always been important for survival. But when the mind becomes overly focused on external approval, every interaction begins to feel like an evaluation. Instead of simply participating in conversations, you begin monitoring your own performance. You might wonder whether your response sounded intelligent enough, whether your reaction seemed appropriate, or whether you revealed too much about yourself. This constant self-monitoring turns communication into a mental performance rather than a natural exchange of ideas. The conversation ends, but the evaluation continues inside your head. Another factor behind overanalyzing communication is uncertainty. The human brain dislikes ambiguity. When something is unclear, the mind attempts to resolve it by exploring different explanations. If someone says something that feels slightly ambiguous or emotionally unclear, your mind may start searching for the correct interpretation. But social interactions often contain ambiguity naturally. People speak quickly. Emotions shift. Words are not always precise reflections of inner thoughts. Trying to decode every possible meaning behind every sentence can become exhausting. Part 51 also explores the influence of anxiety. When someone experiences social anxiety, their mind becomes highly attentive to how interactions unfold. The brain treats social situations as environments where mistakes must be avoided. You might remember a single sentence you said and suddenly worry that it sounded rude or awkward. Even if the other person showed no sign of discomfort, the mind may still create scenarios where the interaction was misinterpreted. This mental replay is an attempt to learn from the situation, but it often creates more doubt rather than clarity. Another psychological factor involved in overanalyzing conversations is empathy. People who care deeply about others often think carefully about how their words affect the people around them. They replay conversations not because they are self-centered, but because they want to make sure they did not hurt someone unintentionally. This empathy can make someone a thoughtful communicator, but when the mind becomes too focused on potential harm, even neutral interactions can become sources of concern. Part 51 reveals another paradox. People who overanalyze conversations are often the same people who are highly considerate and emotionally aware. They want to communicate well. They want others to feel respected and understood. But because they care so much about communication, they place enormous pressure on themselves to get everything exactly right. That pressure transforms ordinary conversations into mental puzzles that never seem fully solved. Another important element is the mind's tendency to fill in missing information. When a conversation ends without clear emotional signals, the brain may begin imagining explanations. If someone responded briefly to a message, you may wonder if they are upset. If someone looked distracted, you may wonder if you said something wrong. The brain attempts to complete the story even when it lacks enough information. Unfortunately, the stories it creates are not always accurate. They are influenced by past experiences, fears, and assumptions rather than objective reality. Part 51 moves toward understanding how this pattern can slowly change. Overanalyzing conversations does not mean something is wrong with you. It often means your brain learned to monitor social interactions carefully in order to protect relationships. The goal was safety and connection, but relationships rarely require perfect communication. Most people are far less focused on analyzing your words than you imagine. They are usually thinking about their own experiences, their own worries, and their own thoughts. Recognizing this can slowly reduce the pressure you place on yourself during interactions. Conversations do not need to be perfect to be meaningful. Sometimes the healthiest approach to communication is allowing small uncertainties to remain unresolved. Not every sentence requires interpretation. Not every pause contains hidden meaning. Sometimes words are simply words. And when the mind begins to accept that not every interaction needs to be analyzed completely, something surprising happens. Conversations begin to feel lighter. The mental replay becomes quieter, and communication gradually returns to what it was meant to be, a shared moment between people, rather than a problem that needs to be solved long after the conversation ends.